Hi, my name is David P. Shapiro. I'm the owner and managing partner of the law office of David P. Shapiro, located in San Diego, California, where my firm helps good people regain control of their future when charged with a crime. This video, I want to talk to you about some things you could be doing if you believe your case or if your attorney is talking to you about mental health diversion, and some ways you can make effective use of the time between the allegation surfacing, your first court date, your second court date, your third court date, especially if you're out of custody. Okay, we had a situation recently in the fall of 2022 that started way back in the early days of COVID in the spring of 2020. We're happy to report that in October of 2022, our client's mental health diversion was not only granted in 2021, deemed satisfied in October of 22, and the entire case dismissed. That entire case involved 3 strikes in one case. Okay, just to be clear, we're not saying he was facing life imprisonment, but he was facing 3 strikes under California's 3 strikes law in one case. So if he was convicted of that, his next strike, if he had one, could have subjected him to the 3 strikes law in California. So this was a situation where this client had 2 separate instances over about a month span, one involving threatening an employee and throwing an item at them, what the law refers to as a deadly weapon, and then the other incident involved an attempted robbery of what was like a cup from Starbucks, and then resisting law enforcement by force. And the general facts of the case, specifically when the client was ultimately arrested, found himself in a situation where he was going through a tough time mentally and was really struggling with his mental health, was not getting the help that he ultimately got in the future that was able to turn his life around. And he's going through a real bad episode, and he has an incident at a Starbucks and is walking across to a nearby gas station, and the cops roll up on him because they think this guy's dangerous, right? And he's certainly unstable. And law enforcement, instead of utilizing what their training should be when someone's having a psychiatric or psychological emergency, they engage him. They get aggressive with him, with his tone, with their language, with their body posturing. And he's like, I'm out. I'm just walking away. And ultimately winds up getting tackled. And that's the basis of what they charge him with, for resisting arrest by force. He's literally on the ground within seconds from when he walks away. The police reports talking about how he charged towards them. Well, there's a good thing called the body-worn camera that sort of refuted that really quickly. And then talking about how it was a struggle, which wasn't necessarily validated by the body-worn camera. Everything that goes with it. Well, very serious charges, right? Putting aside the offensively inflated assertion by the cops that this was some big struggle to get him on the ground and with force and all this nonsense. The other allegations were validated. The other allegations were, in all likelihood, if the witnesses were believed, could have been proven true at a case at trial beyond a reasonable doubt. That was certainly a risk. And, client's facing serious issues both in court and serious issues with his mental health. Again, this goes back to 2020. This was a time when the courts in San Diego were down. You were bailing out of custody. You weren't having your first court date for a very long time. Significant months went by, and we executed a plan in place. We put a plan in place, and then the client, to his credit and to his family's credit, executed that plan beautifully, proactively sought out mental health, was under the care of a psychologist, was under the care of a psychiatrist, was getting the appropriate medication, was staying out of trouble, and really turned his life around while this case was going on. And then we were able to file a mental health diversion motion. And the hope always of a mental health diversion motion is if certain elements are met under the law, that you would be able to get the case dismissed without ever having to be convicted of anything, without ever having to have to plead guilty to anything. It would be a pure diversion, and ultimately to have the arrest record sealed after the case would be dismissed if successful. So the first step was, does the client, right, do you qualify for mental health diversion? And then secondarily, you have to execute the plan that the judge says, okay, yes, you do, you're accepted, this is what we're expecting of you, and then you have to go out and do it. And then if you complete it, usually within about 12 to 18 months or so, you're eligible to have your case ultimately dismissed in its entirety without ever having to plead guilty, and eventually getting your arrest record sealed. And the point of this video is, this was an individual with a supportive family, but obviously the family could only do so much until the client was able to, sort of come to it enough to get the help that he so desperately needed. the general premise here is the same, whether we're dealing with mental health diversion, whether we're dealing with a drug addiction, whether we're dealing with any substance abuse, alcohol addiction, whether we're dealing with domestic violence, any type of situations. Make effective use of the time between court dates. Rely on the advice of your attorney, and if your attorney or your law firm's like, well, don't do anything between now and the next court date, right? Or aren't telling you why they're suggesting you don't do anything, and sort of taking a much more reactive approach, you want to press them on that. Hey, I'm not suggesting I'm doing this. Wouldn't it be helpful? Because that can mean a couple of things. Decision why they're asking you not to do things proactively. There might not, though, and the reasons why they might not is, one, they might not know how to handle this type of case, how to get the type of success and results that are attainable in these types of cases if things are handled appropriately. And the other issue, equally if not more dangerous, is they'll just be too lazy, and they just don't want to work, and they just want to be more reactive. Well, this is the offer. Take it or leave it, right? Our approach at this firm is always, whether we're dealing with a misdemeanor, whether we're dealing with a homicide, is to be as proactive as possible in the sense of, going to a plan, getting a plan, developing a plan that's attainable, talking to our clients about why we think that's in their best interest, flushing out that conversation if there's any disagreement, and then hopefully moving on the same page together, all with the hopes of ensuring the best outcome possible, whether that's fighting a case all the way to trial or whether it's negotiating a relatively quickly plea bargain if that's what's in our client's best interest. So again, in this video, we're talking about, under the premise of mental health diversion, making effective use of the time. Get yourself in treatment, get diagnosed if you've never been diagnosed before, and then stick to the plan of your trusted medical provider. And a lot of good things could happen that way. First and foremost, you're cleaning up your own mental health, right? You're doing what you can to live a better life, to live a happier life, to not be a danger to anyone, to not be a danger to yourself, and live the life that you deserve to live, a life of happiness, right? A life of excess, a life of good and prosperity and strong mental health. And you're also helping your case considerably. Why? Because you're differentiating yourself from everybody else who has an attorney that's not telling them a whole lot, that's not communicating, that's not mapping out a plan. But it's ultimately, at the end of the day, it's on you to effectuate that plan. So hats off to those of you out there that are being proactive, that are doing everything you need to be doing, investing in and then trusting the quality advice you're receiving from your criminal defense attorney or law firm. If you have any questions about mental health diversion, drug diversion, any type of case about the benefits of being proactive in a criminal court case in San Diego, and you have a current or pending criminal court case in San Diego, we're just one phone call away. 619-295-3555. Again, David Shapiro, San Diego criminal lawyer, 619-295-3555.